James Carter had never believed in fairy tales, not since the day his world had split in two, before and after the divorce, before and after the headlines, before and after the silence that filled his penthouse every night. He was the kind of man who could buy anything except the one thing he wanted most, someone who saw him, not his bank account. The city skyline glittered outside his window, 1,000 lights blinking in the darkness. But inside, James sat alone at his kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee cooling in his hands. He'd built Carter Enterprises from the ground up, turned a single auto shop into a global empire. The world called him a genius, a visionary, a billionaire. But none of those titles kept him warm at night. None of them filled the ache that had settled in his chest since his ex-wife had walked out, taking with her the last shreds of his belief in love. He'd tried dating, if you could call it that, dinners with women who smiled too brightly, who asked about his net worth before they asked about his favorite book. He'd learned to spot the gold diggers, the social climbers, the ones who saw him as a prize to be won, not a person to be known. So he'd stopped trying. He poured himself into work, into raising his 8-year-old son, Max, who was the only person in the world who could make him laugh without effort. Max was the reason James got up every morning, the reason he kept going when everything else felt pointless. But even Max couldn't fill the emptiness that crept in after dark, when the city was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything changed. James was late picking up Max from school, a rare slip, but the board meeting had run over and his phone had been buzzing non-stop with urgent messages. By the time he pulled up to the curb, Max was standing under the awning, backpack slung over one shoulder, talking to a woman James had never seen before. She was holding a little girl's hand, her umbrella tilted to shield both of them from the drizzle. Something about the way she bent down to listen to Max, the way she smiled at his joke, made James slow down as he approached. "Dad," Max called, running over. "This is Emily. She's Lily's mom. Lily's in my class." James nodded, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for waiting with him. Sorry I'm late." Emily shook her head, her eyes kind but steady. "No problem. We're always the last ones out anyway. Lily likes to take her time." Lily, a small girl with curly hair and a gap-toothed grin, waved shyly at James. He smiled back, feeling something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Emily's hair was damp from the rain, her coat a little too thin for the weather, but she didn't seem to mind. She looked at James like he was just another parent, not the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes last month. "Come on, Lily," Emily said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Let's get home before we turn into puddles." James watched them walk away, the umbrella bobbing between them. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him without expectation, without calculation. It was refreshing. He shook off the feeling, ushered Max into the car, and told himself it was nothing, just another mom, just another rainy day. But that night, as he tucked Max into bed, James found himself thinking about Emily, about the way she'd listened, really listened, to his son, about the warmth in her voice, the easy way she'd smiled. He told himself it didn't matter. He had no room in his life for complications, no time for hope. But hope, it seemed, had a way of sneaking in through the cracks. The next morning, James found himself lingering at drop-off, scanning the crowd for a glimpse of Emily. He spotted her by the playground, kneeling to tie Lily's shoe. She looked up, caught his eye, and smiled. James felt his heart stutter in his chest, a ridiculous reaction, but he couldn't help it. "Morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "Morning," Emily replied, standing up. "Max ready for the spelling test?" James grinned. "He says he is. I'm not so sure." Emily laughed, a sound that was somehow both soft and strong. "Lily's been practicing all week. She's determined to beat Max this time." James glanced at the two kids, who were already racing toward the school doors. "They're good for each other," he said. "They are," Emily agreed. It's nice. Lily doesn't have a lot of friends. We move around a lot. James hesitated, curiosity getting the better of him. Military? Emily shook her head. No, just life. Things haven't always been easy. He wanted to ask more, but the bell rang, and Emily waved goodbye, hurrying after Lily. James watched her go, feeling a strange sense of loss. He told himself not to get involved. He didn't know her, didn't need the messiness of someone else's life. But as he drove to work, her laughter echoed in his mind, and he wondered what it would be like to hear it again. That evening, Max asked if Lily and her mom could come over for dinner sometime. James hesitated, the old walls rising up inside him. But Max's hopeful eyes wore him down, and he found himself saying yes before he could think better of it. "Can I invite them tomorrow?" Max asked, bouncing on his toes. James nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in his stomach. "Sure, buddy. We'll make spaghetti. Everybody likes spaghetti, right?" Max grinned. "Lily loves it. She says her mom makes the best garlic bread." James smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Then we'll have to see if she'll share her secret." That night, as he lay in bed, James realized he was looking forward to something for the first time in a long time. He tried to tell himself it was just for Max, just a friendly dinner, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. He was curious about Emily, about the woman who didn't seem to care about his money, who looked at him like he was just a dad, not a billionaire. He wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was ready to let someone in again. The invitation was simple, a handwritten note in Max's backpack, scrawled in a child's uneven print. "Lily and her mom, please come to dinner at our house Friday. We're making spaghetti. From Max and Dad." James found it after work, tucked between a math worksheet and a crumpled juice box. He smiled despite himself, picturing Max's earnest face as he handed it to Lily. There was something pure about the way children made friends. No pretense or hesitation, just a simple question and a hope for yes. Friday arrived with a nervous energy James hadn't felt in years. He left work early, ignoring the unread emails piling up on his phone. He stopped at the grocery store, wandering the aisles with a cart, debating between fresh basil and the dried kind, wondering if Emily would notice the difference. He bought garlic, real butter, and a loaf of bread he hoped would pass for homemade. At home, he cleaned the kitchen twice, set the table with the good plates, and tried not to overthink every detail. Max was a whirlwind of excitement, bouncing from room to room, asking if he could help. James let him stir the sauce, sprinkle cheese on the garlic bread, and fold napkins into awkward triangles. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. James checked his watch, then the window, then his watch again. He told himself it didn't matter if they showed up, it was just dinner. But when the doorbell finally rang, his heart leapt in his chest. Emily stood on the porch, Lily at her side, both of them holding a plate covered in foil. Emily's hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She wore a faded blue sweater and jeans, nothing fancy, but she looked more beautiful than anyone James had ever seen. Lily grinned, holding out the plate. "We brought brownies. Mom says you can't have spaghetti without dessert." James laughed, stepping aside to let them in. "You're absolutely right. Come on in." The house felt warmer with them there, the air filled with the scent of baking bread and the sound of children's laughter. Max and Lily disappeared to his room, leaving James and Emily alone in the kitchen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. James busied himself with the pasta, trying to hide his nerves. "Your house is lovely," Emily said, glancing around. "Max talks about it all the time." James shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It's just a house, gets a little quiet sometimes." Emily smiled, her eyes soft. "I know the feeling." They ate at the kitchen table, passing bowls of spaghetti and plates of garlic bread, the conversation easy and unforced. Emily told stories about Lily's obsession with dinosaurs, about the time she tried to build a volcano in the bathtub. Max chimed in with tales of school, of soccer games and spelling bees. James found himself laughing more than he had in months, the tension in his shoulders easing with every minute. After dinner, the kids retreated to the living room, leaving James and Emily to clear the table. They worked in companionable silence, the clink of dishes and the hum of the dishwasher filling the space between them. "Thank you for inviting us," Emily said, drying a plate. "Lily doesn't get a lot of nights like this. It means a lot." James glanced at her, surprised by the emotion in her voice. "You're always welcome here, both of you." Emily hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the plate. "It's not always easy being a single mom. People make assumptions. Sometimes it feels like we're on the outside looking in." James nodded, understanding more than he could say. "I get it. After the divorce, people looked at me differently, like I was broken or dangerous or just less." Emily met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "You're not less. Neither is Max." James swallowed, the words catching in his throat. "Thank you." They finished the dishes, then joined the kids in the living room. Max and Lily were building a fort out of couch cushions, their laughter echoing through the house. Emily sat on the floor, helping Lily drape a blanket over the top. James watched them, a strange ache blooming in his chest. It felt like something he'd lost a long time ago. Family, belonging, the simple joy of being together. When it was time to say goodnight, Lily hugged Max, promising to bring her favorite dinosaur book next time. Emily lingered at the door, her hand on the knob. "Thank you again," she said softly. "Tonight was nice." James smiled, his heart pounding. "Let's do it again soon." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "I'd like that." After they left, James stood in the doorway, watching their tail lights disappear down the street. He felt lighter, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally begun to lift. Max came up beside him, yawning. "Dad, can we do this every week?" James ruffled his hair, smiling. "We'll see, buddy, but I hope so." That night, James lay awake, replaying the evening in his mind. He thought about Emily's laughter, the way she listened, the warmth in her eyes. He thought about Lily, about the way she fits so easily into their lives. For the first time in years, he let himself imagine a future that wasn't just work and loneliness, a future with room for hope, for love, for something real. The next few weeks passed in a blur of dinners, playdates, and quiet conversations. Emily and Lily became a fixture in their lives, their presence as natural as sunlight. James found himself looking forward to their visits, to the sound of Lily's laughter, to the way Emily's hand brushed his when they passed the salad bowl. He learned that Emily worked 2 jobs, one at a bookstore, another cleaning offices at night. She never complained, never asked for help, but James saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she hid her worries behind a smile. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, James and Emily sat on the porch, mugs of tea warming their hands. The city lights twinkled in the distance, the air crisp with the promise of spring. "Do you ever get tired?" James asked, his voice gentle. Emily laughed, a soft, tired sound. "All the time, but I don't have a choice. Lily needs me, that's all that matters." James studied her, admiration and something deeper stirring in his chest. "You're stronger than you think." Emily looked away, her cheeks flushing. "I don't feel strong. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." James reached over, covering her hand with his. "You're not alone, not anymore." Emily's eyes met his, wide and searching. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then she smiled, a small, hopeful smile that made James' heart ache. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in silence, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. James wanted to tell her everything, to confess how much she meant to him, how she'd changed his life in ways he couldn't explain. But the words caught in his throat, tangled up with fear and hope and the memory of every time he'd been hurt before. Instead, he squeezed her hand, letting the silence speak for him. Inside, the kids slept soundly, their dreams filled with forts and dinosaurs and the promise of tomorrow. Outside, James and Emily sat together, 2 people who had given up on love, finding it again in the most unexpected place. Spring arrived in the city with a rush of green and gold, the air warming, the days stretching longer. James found himself waking up before his alarm, eager for the small rituals that had become the heartbeat of his life. Packing Max's lunch, texting Emily good morning, planning weekend adventures for the four of them. The change was subtle at first, but soon even his colleagues noticed. He smiled more. He left the office on time. He talked about things other than quarterly reports and market shares. One Saturday, James suggested a picnic in the park. Max and Lily ran ahead, chasing each other through the grass, while James and Emily trailed behind, arms full of sandwiches and juice boxes. The park was alive with families, the air thick with laughter and the scent of blooming flowers. Emily spread a blanket under a tree, her hair catching the sunlight, her eyes bright with happiness. They ate and talked, the conversation easy and unhurried. Emily told stories about her childhood in a small town, about the bookstore where she worked, about the dreams she'd put on hold when Lily was born. James listened, drawn in by her honesty, her resilience, the quiet strength that ran through every word. After lunch, the kids built castles out of sticks and leaves, their laughter ringing across the grass. James watched them, a lump rising in his throat. He glanced at Emily, who was watching Lily with a look of pure love. "She's lucky to have you," James said softly. Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm the lucky one. She saved me, gave me a reason to keep going." James nodded, understanding more than he could say. "Max did the same for me." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people truly trust each other. James wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance between them, but he hesitated. He was still afraid of moving too fast, of scaring her away, of letting himself hope for too much. As the afternoon faded into evening, they packed up and headed home. In the car, Max and Lily fell asleep, their heads resting against each other. Emily glanced at James, her eyes soft. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "It was perfect." James smiled, his heart full. "Anytime." The weeks that followed were a blur of small moments. Movie nights, homework help, Sunday pancakes. James found himself falling for Emily in ways he hadn't thought possible. He loved the way she laughed, the way she listened, the way she made even the ordinary feel extraordinary. He loved the way Lily fit so seamlessly into their lives, her presence a constant reminder of the family he'd always wanted. But with happiness came fear. James worried about the future, about what would happen if things fell apart. He worried about Max, about Lily, about the fragile balance they'd found. He worried about Emily, about whether she felt the same, about whether she was ready for something more. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, James and Emily sat on the porch, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The air was cool, the sky clear and full of stars. "Can I ask you something?" James said, his voice hesitant. Emily nodded, her eyes searching his face. "Do you ever think about us, about what this could be?" Emily was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I do, all the time. But I'm scared, James. I've been on my own for so long. It's hard to let someone in, to trust that it won't fall apart." James reached for her hand, his fingers trembling. "I'm scared too, but I don't want to let fear keep me from something real. Not anymore." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Me neither." He leaned in, closing the distance between them, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was gentle, tentative, full of promise. For a moment, the world fell away, leaving only the two of them, wrapped in the warmth of something new and fragile and beautiful. When they pulled apart, Emily smiled, her cheeks flushed. I guess we're really doing this." James laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. "Yeah, I guess we are." From that night on, everything changed. They moved through the world as a unit, their lives intertwined in ways both big and small. James introduced Emily and Lily to his friends, to his colleagues, to the people who mattered most. Emily brought James into her world, introducing him to the bookstore staff, to the neighbors who watched Lily when she worked late. There were challenges, of course. Not everyone understood. Some of James's friends questioned his choices, wondered why he was dating a single mom who worked 2 jobs. Some of Emily's friends worried she was getting in over her head, that James's world was too different, too complicated. But James and Emily held on to each other, weathering the storms together. They talked through their fears, their hopes, their dreams. They made mistakes, apologized, forgave. They learned to trust, to lean on each other, to believe in the possibility of happiness. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the kids chase fireflies in the yard, James turned to Emily, his heart pounding. "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I love you, Emily. I love Lily. I love the life we're building together." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her smile radiant. "I love you too, James, more than I ever thought possible." They sat together, wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching out before them, uncertain, imperfect, but full of hope. Summer brought a new rhythm to their lives. The days grew longer, filled with sunlight and laughter, and the boundaries between James and Emily's worlds blurred until they felt like one. Max and Lily became inseparable, inventing games, building forts, and sharing secrets in the shade of the backyard trees. Emily's laughter rang through the house, bright and unguarded, and James found himself smiling for no reason at all. He'd never known happiness could be so simple, so quiet, so complete. But even in the warmth of new love, shadows lingered. James's wealth was never far from the surface, a silent presence in every room. Emily tried to ignore it, to focus on the man she loved and not the empire he'd built, but sometimes it pressed in around her, heavy and cold. She worried about fitting in, about what people thought, about whether she and Lily truly belonged in this world of privilege and power. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Emily voiced her fears. The kids were inside, painting pictures at the kitchen table, their voices drifting through the open window. "James," Emily began, her voice hesitant, "do you ever wonder if this is too much for me, for Lily? I mean, your life, it's so different from ours. Sometimes I feel like I'm just waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong." James reached for her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Emily, you belong here. You and Lily, you're my family. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you, about us." Emily looked down, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's just hard sometimes. I don't want Lily to feel out of place. I don't want her to think she has to change who she is to fit in." James squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "She doesn't. Neither do you. I love you both exactly as you are. That's never going to change." Emily smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, Max and Lily's laughter echoed, a reminder of all they'd built together. As the weeks passed, James and Emily faced their challenges head-on. There were awkward moments, school events where other parents whispered behind their backs, business dinners where Emily felt out of place in her thrift store dress. But James stood by her side, proud and unashamed, introducing her as the woman he loved. Emily learned to hold her head high, to trust in the strength of their bond, to believe that love was enough. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, James found Emily in the backyard, sitting on the old swing set with Lily in her lap. The little girl was crying, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. "What happened?" James asked, kneeling beside them. Emily stroked Lily's hair, her voice soft. "Some kids at the park said we didn't belong here, that we were just pretending." James's heart ached at the pain in Lily's eyes. He reached out, pulling them both into a hug. "You belong here. This is your home. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily sniffled, her tears slowing. "Promise?" James smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Promise." That night, after Lily was asleep, James and Emily sat together in the quiet house. Emily leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just want her to be happy." "She is happy. We all are. And we'll get through this, together." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." James kissed her forehead, his heart full. "You'll never have to find out." As summer faded into fall, their lives settled into a new kind of normal. Emily found a new job at a local charity, one that let her spend more time with Lily. James cut back his hours at the office, choosing school pickups and soccer games over board meetings and business trips. They spent weekends exploring the city, discovering hidden parks and cozy cafes, building memories that would last a lifetime. One crisp October evening, James planned a surprise. He took Emily and the kids to the park where they'd had their first picnic, the trees ablaze with autumn color. As the sun set, painting the world in gold, James knelt on one knee, a small velvet box in his hand. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I never thought I'd find love again. I never thought I'd find someone who saw me. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me. You changed my life. You made me believe in love again. Will you marry me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. Max and Lily watched, wide-eyed and hopeful. "Yes," Emily whispered, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, James, I will." The kids cheered, racing to hug them both, their laughter echoing through the park. James slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, his hands shaking with happiness. They celebrated with hot chocolate and marshmallows, sitting together on the old picnic blanket, the world spinning around them in a blur of color and light. For the first time in years, James felt whole. He looked at Emily, at Max and Lily, and knew he'd found everything he'd ever wanted. Their wedding was small, just family and close friends, held in the backyard under a canopy of twinkling lights. Emily wore a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes shining with happiness. James wore a suit, but it was his smile that everyone remembered, a smile that spoke of hope, of healing, of a love that had survived every storm. As they danced together under the stars, Emily whispered in his ear, "Thank you for not giving up on love." James held her close, his heart overflowing. "Thank you for teaching me how to believe again." Max and Lily twirled around them, their laughter rising into the night, a promise of all the joys still to come. The city lights sparkled in the distance, but for James and Emily, the only world that mattered was the one they'd built together, a world of second chances, of family, of love that refused to be measured by anything but the happiness they found in each other's arms. And so, the billionaire who had given up on love found it again, not in the boardroom or the headlines, but in the quiet moments of everyday life, with a single mom who changed his mind forever and a family that made him whole.